In this video lesson, we are going to perform the create, read, update, delete operations in Xamarin Forms using SQLite. So what is SQLite? SQLite is a lightweight database that implements a small, fast, self-contained, high-reliability, full-featured SQL database engine. SQLite.NET is a minimalistic library that provides basic ORM or object relation mapping features for .NET and Mono application developers. Good day everyone. I'm Michael, and I'm using a text-to-speech program to have a more clear speech and audio. In this video lesson, you will learn the following. 1. Install SQLite.NET PCL from NuGet Package Manager for solution. 2. Store data locally in a SQLite.NET database. 3. Perform basic CRUD operation. Now let's open the Visual Studio and do some coding. For our UI, I just copy most of the code from our flyout page lesson. If you are not familiar with flyout page, you probably need to watch first my lesson about flyout page. On my main page, I set the flyout in detail. I also already created the event for the selection of an item from the flyout menu. So here is our flyout menu page. It has two menus, the home page and the employee page. Inside the employee page, I added a collection view. We will be using it to display the list of employees added to the database. And the information displayed is ID, name, and address. Here is the data model for employee. We will be also using these to design the structure of our table. So the first thing to do is to install the SQLite.NET PCL to our project using the NuGet Package Manager. After installing the SQLite, let's modify our data model. Here, I set the ID as the primary key where the value is auto-increment, and the name with max length of 50 characters. This will be the structure of the employee table. Now let's add a new class. And name it SQLite Helper. This class will be responsible for SQLite connection, creating of a table, and the basic CRUD operations, such as creating, reading, updating, and deleting functions. This will construct a new SQLite asynchronous connection and pull the SQLite database specified database path. This will create the table based on our data model, which is the employee model. This task will create or insert the object passed to it. And it will return an integer value, which is the number of rows added to the table. This task will read the data from the table and returns a queryable interface. This will update the database based on the object passed to it. And last is the delete function, which deletes the database on the object passed to it. This function returns a number of deleted rows from the table. Now let's get the local file path for storing the database, which must be declared in app.xaml.cs file. We still get an error here because the SQLite helper class that we have created is unreachable. We need to make the class public first. Here is the path of our local database. And this string will be the name of our database. Now that the connection is SQLite.net, function for create, read, update, and delete the name and the location of the database are all set. Let's start by reading data from the database. I would like to display all the employees in the collection view upon opening this page. So let's override the page on appearing method and set the item source value. This method will return a list of employee, so can assign it to the item source of the collection view. If we run the app, we will not see yet any data from the collection view, since we have not added or inserted any employee yet from the database. Now let's create a new page where we can add or edit the employee's information. Since the ID is set to auto-increment, there is no need to manually input the value. It will automatically be added to the table upon inserting data. Now let's implement the click event. Here, we make sure that the input value from name entry address entry is not null or whitespace. If valid, then create a new employee with values coming from the entry element. Now back to employee page. Let's add a toolbar item for adding a new employee. Then go to code behind to implement the clicked event. Now let's push the employee detail page. Let us run the app. We get an error. We need to set the employee model class into public first. Let's run again. Let's add a new employee. Save. The added employee will display automatically to the collection view. We override the onAppearing method of the page and set the item's source value of the collection view that is retrieved from the database. Let's add more employees. Since have now our local database. The data is now stored in the local drive of the device. This means, even after closing the app, the data will remain intact. Unlike what we did in my previous lessons, where we hard-coded the data which resets every time the app is reopened. Next is to update the data. Now instead of adding a new toolbar item, let's add a swipe gesture to the collection view. Here we use the binding period. This means that we pass the employee object, not just the name or the address. Now let's go to code behind and implement the invoked method. Here we cast the sender as swipe item, which is the item being swiped. From item, we get it command parameter, where we bind the employee object. Then cast it employee object. Now, instead of creating a new page to update the employee detail, we will be using the employee detail page where we add the new employee. We just need some modifications to the page. Now let's go back to the employee detail page and add another constructor. Now we have two constructors in this page. First is the default. This is what we used if we want to add a new employee. Second is this, that has one argument with a type of employee. So here we change the title of the page to edit info to indicate that we would like to update information. I also declare an employee type variable, where we assign the object that is being passed to the constructor. Then set the text property of the name and address entry. Then set the focus to name entry. Now go to Save button clicked event to call the update method. If the employee object is not null, this means that the user is trying to update a record. Let's create the method for our update. Here we set the name and address property of the object and pass it to the update task and navigate back to employee page. So if the employee object is not null, we assume that the user is trying to update info. If it's null, then add a new employee. Now back to employee page code behind. Let's call the employee details constructor with parameter, where we can pass the swipe item. Let's run the app again. We can now create, read, update data. The last operation is the delete operation. Let's just add another swipe item. Here is our swipe item for delete. Now go to code behind to implement the event. This display alert will return a true if the user press yes, then false if not. If the user press yes, that's the time we delete the swipe item from the database. Let's run the app. The collection view did not update its item source because the page is currently open. The content will refresh if the page is recall or reappear. If we want to refresh the item source upon deleting an item, we could reassign the collection view item's source in the delete event. Here is reassign the item source of the collection view to refresh the current display data after deleting an item. Let's run the app again. Now that's how we create connections, create a table, and perform the CRUD operations using SQLite NetPCL. We can also search from the database using link. Before we implement the text change event of the search bar, let's add first another task to our SQLite helper class. This task will return a list of employees based on the string value we pass to it. Back to code behind and implement the text changed event. Let's run the app again. That's all for this video lesson. If you have questions, suggestions, something to add, or you think something is missing or incorrect to the lesson, please let me know. Again, this is Michael, thank you and see you at my next video lesson. Keep safe everyone.